Morning all, here we are back again. It's roasting up here today, getting a bit of a tan going as well. It's where are we? What day is it? It's just day, isn't it? Everything's just day at the moment. Today is Sunday, middle of the bank holiday, and we're going to do part 7 of the Obsession Diaries, if you like, podcasts, whatever they are. And we've got to Horton, which is when stuff starts to get quite complicated. For me, it's getting complicated. I must have, I don't know, 500's a big underestimate. Somewhere between 500 and 1,000 prints of Horton. We've done 3 years on there, which I'll obviously go through. I had a shoebox full, I had hundreds in, and I had packets and packets and packets of them, all just mixed up. So I had to sort them all out into year 1, year 2 and year 3. Which is harder than you think when you've got no point of reference, only the book, which has only got some of the stories in. I've been on the phone non-stop, just phoning up Reg, phoning up Keith, phoning up anyone that'll answer, saying such and such with such and such, year 1, 2 or 3. I've been on Facebook trying to get photos off of people, but I think I'm sort of nearly there. But then to compound it, I've got a lot of old actual video footage. Now the video footage is awful quality, so I apologise in advance, but you've got to bear in mind that this was 91 to 94, 1991 to 1994, and all that was around at the time were those big bulky plastic camcorders with a strap that, you know, everyone was walking around like this the whole time videoing stuff, weren't they? Most of us didn't have, the first year especially, there'd be less, the first few that I'll start now, there'd be less, there'd be some, but less video. Because only the guys who actually had any money and worked for a living could afford these camcorders. You can probably pick them up now for about 20 quid. In fact, you could do it better on your phone, far, far better. Phil Thompson had one, and Sticky Bean had one. So we sort of correlated all of their footage, and as the years went by, I think even I bought one. And what we done, we produced a VHS tape just for the members, not for money, profit or anything, just for the crack. We put loads of music soundtracks over it, and it's that original VHS tape. Sticky Bean managed to get it somehow onto digital, so obviously it's lost quality doing that. He's emailed me or sent me the footage. I've uploaded the footage, lost more quality there. And then I've edited it down into relevant captures and what have you, so it's lost more quality there. But I think the main thing that completely screws the video is the colours, which is why I've got my most brightest t-shirt on. Most brightest, that's good England, isn't it? My brightest t-shirt on today, and as you will see in the video footage, it probably wouldn't be the same without a stupid hat. So one of my I've got a big hat collection. I've got these hung all over my office. I've got 4 up here. So we're going to go back to the 90s. Coloured clothing was everywhere. It was the middle of the rave scene. So everywhere sold all this bright clothing. And for some reason, you know, when I look back at those Horton videos, we all fully embraced that. In fact, my nickname on the lake was Raver, which, you know, Dave the Rave was where it started, but to be honest, looking at the clothing we used to wear, it was very appropriate for the times. I was only ever outdone really by Keith. Keith used to wear outlandish clothes, but I think that all of these bright colours on this video, I just don't think it can handle it. It almost looks like we leave a trail behind us as we walk across a screen of like mixed colours, psychedelic sort of aura behind us as we wander off screen. But it is good. I'm going to include as much as I can because it's good to, it transports me and hopefully you straight back to what it was actually like on the bank then. And it was great fun. I mean, Horton was an amazing, amazing time in my life. And like I said at the end of the last episode, we weren't even sure in the close season that we'd got tickets at all for anywhere. And we'd applied for Frampton Court and Horton. Both of which came up. We went down to Frampton Court, had a look at that. It's a lovely lake. It was a long way for us. It's down in the West Country, and it was quite a big journey for us. We liked it, but we were waiting to hear about Horton. Anyway, about a week later, we got the news that we'd got a Horton ticket. It coincided, funnily enough, with Keith actually passing his driving test. He must have been the last person I knew to take his driving test. But he passed his driving test, so tickets came through, and I thought, what a perfect opportunity. I've been driving around for years, so I gave him a ring, said, right, come round to my house in your car, pick me up, and you can drive us down to Horton, and we'll go and have a look. Which is exactly what we did. Got on the motorway, went down to Horton, a little bit scary, you know, new driver on the M25. We went down and had a wander around Horton. It was, I don't know how to describe it really. It was a trout lake. That's what it had been. It was a trout lake, and it looked like a trout lake. They prune all the trees and bushes up to whatever, 10, 12 foot high for the old, that's fly fishing by the way. So it was quite sparse, it was quite open. The banks were nice, they had nice sort of reeds and sedges and stuff. The swims were a little bit overgrown. It was a nice lake, but it was compared to where sort of lakes like Pit 4 and, you know, places we had been fishing. It lacked a little bit of foliage, but the water was gin clear. It looked quite deep, absolutely gin clear, it'd be perfect for fish spotting. I don't think we saw any fish that first walk round, it was probably quite early. I can't remember, I'm going to say April time, something like that, but I don't know for sure. I do remember that we wandered around Horton and then we went up the road, like literally just next door, and we found a great big lake there which turned out to be Kingsmead, which was later split into two, Kingsmead Islands and K1, where I've been fishing this winter. And bizarrely enough, I mean, this was, I don't know, nearly 30 years ago. I've just got my ticket through. It just came through a couple of days ago for Kingsmead Island Lake for this coming year, and when we ever get out of this loft, that's exactly where I'll be going. And we drove round there. I remember there was that was I think the second time we went up for a look round. There was me, Keith, and his missus, and I remember us on this great big sailing club area playing frisbee and that in the sun, and looking at this huge lake, thinking how nice it looked. But that wasn't what we were there for. We were there for Horton. So we thought about it and thought, well, you know, there's got some massive fish in there. You know, we knew of because everything was documented. Like I said before, they were taken en masse out of Longfield, and there was a Longfield A team, if you like, and we'd seen photos of them all. There was the parrot, shoulders, the koi, hardtail, all these amazing, Jack the net ripper, he was the biggest one. He was a 40-pounder. You know, 40 pounds, you know, back then, that is absolutely immense. So we decided that's what we were going to do. We were going to start off the season come June the 16th on Horton. So we got up there, I don't know, at least 24 hours before it started. I can't remember, but I know there was a whole day and a night to go before we could start to fish. And we pulled up to the gates at Horton. There's this big sort of not cast iron, I suppose they are cast gate anyway, these big massive sort of wrought iron, that's the words I'm looking for, wrought iron gates, Horton. So we pulled up at these Horton gates, and there was already one car there. The gates were locked, chained up. There was already one car there. We pulled up behind it, got out and said, is this, you know, are we waiting for Horton? Yeah. He said, I think someone's going to let us in later on today. So anyway, so I sat about in the sun, and then another motor pulled up behind me. It was sort of a transit, Japanese version of a transit, can't remember what make, doesn't really matter. And a couple of guys got out of there. One was a guy called Tony Badham, who's still a very good friend, and the other was Johnny Moult, his mate, who could talk for England. Johnny Moult really could. Didn't know him at all at the time, didn't know him from Adam. They got out, shook hands and said, is this the queue for Horton? Yeah. Said, what's happening? Said, won't be till later on. You know, we kept repeating this as the queue got bigger out onto the road. And I remember Johnny Moults walked up the side of the van, sliding side door, pulled the side door back with a big clang, and there's a big builder's bucket right inside the door, full of ice and water and cans of cider. And I thought, I'm going to like it here. I like these people already. So we stood outside and had a few beers. And eventually a guy from, it was Leisure Sports back then, turned up, unlocked the gates, but wouldn't let us down to the lake. It's a long lane down to the lake, and it does a big U-E at the end. And just before the sort of hairpin, there was a little field on the left-hand side. And he said, this is like your waiting area, if you like. You sort out amongst yourselves what you're going to do, you know. If you're going to have a draw or who got here first or whatever. He said, I'm not getting involved in any of that. It's up to you lot. He said, but you've got to stay in here, and tomorrow morning at whatever o'clock, we'll open the gates and you can go into the lake, you can set up and crack on, you know, start fishing at, I think they said 8 p.m. that night. So you could get out in the light before the midnight proper start. So we've gone round into this sort of grassy car parky area, our waiting room, if you like, and it was perfect because the thing about Horton, you've got to remember, it was a new syndicate. This was the first year of the first syndicate. So it didn't have any of that sort of hierarchy that you get with syndicates sometimes. It didn't have existing members. It didn't have those that knew better and those that were newbies. Everyone was on a level playing field. People had little bits of information about the lake. Some of the guys lived locally and they'd been up for a walk round when it was a day ticket. A couple of them had even fished it on a day ticket. But in general, it was a level playing field and we were all exactly the same. So we sort of got to know each other. We had, I'd say, all afternoon, all evening, all night, and until, I don't know, let's say 8 o'clock in the morning. I made that up, but something like that, until the gates opened. So we got to know each other, and obviously maybe there was 20, I don't know, 20 carp anglers in a little grassy field with no rods. What are you going to do? Drink and smoke, basically, and chat. And that's exactly what we did. We drank, we smoked, we chatted. I think a couple of barbecues came out in the evening. It was a blinding day. It really was. But more than anything, you get to identify people of a like mind. We're all carp anglers. We've all got that. You know, like I said before, we're all a community. We've all got that single drive to catch carp. But it's more than that, isn't it? You know, you meet people like that all the time. But some of them become friends, and some of them become, you know, friends for the life that comes after. And, you know, I'm happy to say that some of the people I met in that car park that night are still really, really firm friends of mine now, all these decades later, like proper mates, and always will be. One particularly that sticks out was CP. That was the first time I ever met CP. He was in that car park. He turned up with his mate, little Robbie, and they were both Slough boys, and Slough's just only up the road from Horton, so they were local lads. They were colourful and they were hilarious. They really were proper entertainers. Quite different to each other, but they had real depth of character, and I thought I like you two straight away. And Tony Badham and Malty, I got on really well with them, and we became a little clique, I suppose, in that little car park. And with Keith and a couple of others that sort of joined in, and you know, the more not serious, but the ones that didn't drink quite as much or smoke anything, they were set in different groups. So it's like first day at school, really. You pick your mates, don't you? And yeah, we stayed up late into the night talking about who was going to do what and who was going to catch this and who was going to catch that. I think the main topic of conversation though was how we were going to arrange swim allocation. And I'll never forget, the saying ended up, are we having a walk-off or what? Every time one person went from one group to another, it was like, are we having a walk-off or what? And it just became this little buzz sentence that you know, all of those guys will still remember now. It just became a joke in the end. But that's what we decided, you know, in the morning. We were going to give everyone a piece of paper, we probably did it that evening actually, write out pieces of paper with a number of what order you turned up in. And at the time, there was two guys in the car in front, so I think me and Keith were 3 and 4. Well, we were 3 and 4. And then Tony would have been 4 and 5 with Johnny Malt, etc., etc. That night it rained, which may seem like insignificant, and why would I remember that it rained? It didn't rain very hard, but I know it rained because I was woken up just on first light, wet. And what I'd done, what most of us had done, is just put bed chairs out on the field and put a brolly over the top. Now my brolly, I'd probably put it up very, very late at night. I would imagine no pegs, because it wasn't there when I woke up anyway. It was in the field next door. And I'm just laying out under the clouds and the rain, getting soaking wet. So got up, retrieved my bits of stuff that was all over the place. Everyone tidied all their sort of bomb site away. We'd crushed all the cans, put them in a big bag. Matey came, opened the gates, and we drove round the corner for the first time actually into Horton to fish. Now, as you go round the bend into Horton, the first thing you see is a lodge. It's an old trout lodge, or trout fisherman's lodge. And if I remember rightly, there was practically nothing in it at the time. It was just empty. You know, from the trout days, the trout anglers had taken whatever personal effects they had in there, and it was just an empty lodge. It's quite nice. It was big, but there weren't a lot going on in there. It had water. I think it had a toilet in there, maybe even a shower, but not 100%. Yeah, I think it did. Might have had a shower. I don't know. It was to become a lot grander through our time there, but at this stage it was just this empty lodge. And outside the lodge, there's a raised sort of patio area and a little fence, and that looks out over the lake. Now, right in front of that is a little jetty that goes out where they moored the old trout boats, and there was still a punt of some description moored down on this jetty. So we all went in and we all sort of assembled on this patio area. And you know, if you were to go down and stand on the punt and look out over the lake, and once we found out what time we could all disperse, you know, down to the swims, maybe let's say it was midday, we all knew what order we were going to do it in, and it was going to be the famous walk-off. So angler one would just walk off, but in general you'd say, I'm going over there, to save, you know, confusion, and off he'd go, and then angler two would go over there and what have you. But before the walk-off, we'd had a walk round the lake, and we got up to the top bit to the church bay, and we bumped into Chris Ball, who's very famous, you know, a Carp historian, he likes to sort of label himself as. And he was there, and he was feeding some fish in the margins, and we've gone down and introduced ourselves and started chatting to him. And there was two huge mirror carp there, and he told us they were Jack the Net Ripper and the parrot, I think it was. So two of the biggest fish, two of the 18 biggest fish in the lake there, gin clear water, and a couple of others drifting around in the bay, and you're thinking, oh my God, this is like nothing I've ever seen before in my life. You know, probably nobody on the lake had ever seen a 40-pounder before. And there one was, you know, huge, great fish, huge, very deep fish, a couple of big scales and a black mark on one side, and then the parrot's obviously got the twisted face where it got its name from. I was just thinking, oh my God, you know, we've got to be in this church bay. We're third and fourth out the draw. We've got to be in this church bay. Anyway, we carried on round and we got almost back to the lodge. Down that end, there's we didn't know at the time, but that's where the only real feature in the lake is. There's a plateau and a little bar, so from the two opposite sides of the lake you can get to this shallower feature. And as soon as we got down there and saw, there were fish all over it, just you know, all over this area, which was turned out to be the shallow bit, and then it drops down again deep before the far bank. And then we're like, oh my God, we've got to be here as well, you know. But that's 4 swims, or three proper swims, where you can get to where these fish are, and we're 3 and 4. We're getting somewhere close. Just about then, a young lad turns up who was a little bit disgruntled, because apparently he'd been there 24 hours before all of us and been turned away from the gate by a bailiff. He'd got there 2 days before to queue, and we sort of felt sorry for him really, because we'd made up the rules as we went along, and we'd already done all the numbers. You know, number one had number one, but we had a chat amongst ourselves and said, fair enough, he was here first, so we got him a piece of paper with 0 on it, and that was obviously his nickname thereafter, although he didn't actually do a lot of fishing thereafter, but he was instantly 0. So we'd been pushed back 1 spot. Unfortunately, everybody else had walked around the lake as well, and I think number 1 and 2 may have gone in the church bay, and number 3 and 4 on this shallow bit. So that left me and Keith to go next, and the best bits, we thought the best bits had probably gone. So I went right up the top end, as close to the church bay as I could get. There was a little point there, which now is known as Springgates Point. At the time wasn't known as anything. Most of the swims weren't known as anything at the time. We named an awful lot of them. And I sat up in there, and it was a beautiful little swim. It had a little wooden jetty in front, only a small like trout casting jetty, and the sort of undergrowth had started to encroach a little bit. There was lovely sort of wispy sort of reeds and wild grasses and that. It was beautiful, and it was all grass on the ground and that. And I got set up in there for the night, and I think Keith was just round to my right in the other bay, because the point I was on formed the church bay and this dog bay, so called because there was a kennels at the back. You could hear them barking all day. And I think Keith was in that one. Set up, had a plumb around, horrified when we plumbed around. Everywhere seemed to be about 18 foot deep, apart from Keith's swim. Keith's swim was about 12, 14 foot, which we didn't realise at the time. That was the shallow bit. My swim was 18, 19 foot. We were to find out later that a lot of the lake was even deeper than that. Not something we were used to at all. But anyway, we got settled into the 2 swims, put them out at whatever the allowed time was, and just settled in, ready for the first day of the season. New season, new lake, 40 pounders swimming around in front of us, and a load of mid-30s. You could say we were a little bit excited. So I reckon, the season, like after midnight, was probably, I don't know, I'd guess 10 minutes old. It literally had not long gone past the witching hour, and a huge shout went up. Tony Badham and Johnny Moult were over sort of to my right on the opposite bank, on the side bank. There was a couple of little jetties poking out some reeds there, and Johnny Moult had a bite. 10 minutes after 12 or whatever it was, after 12, and he had a bite, and he played this fish, and he knew it was a big fish, and it was doing this, that and the other. Anyway, he's got it in the net, and it let out a huge roar, and then the roars got bigger, and you can see lights going up and down the bank. He's only gone and caught Jack, biggest fish in the lake, straight away, bang, on the off. And I believe it was something enormous, like about 44 pounds. Just ridiculous. But everyone was well pleased for him. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm well pleased for him as well. But I'm thinking, they're catchable. You know, we've just started and someone's already had the big one, and you've got all these other 18 members in the lake and various others as well. And I'm thinking, this is going to be good. This is really going to be a good year. We've got all these carp out here. They're not, you know, because obviously they're mythical, these fish, from when they were in Longfield. They did wise up really quick. They did become very, very hard to catch. Very cute fish, because they already had it up here. But anyway, like I say, 10 minutes in, Johnny Moult said Jack, and we're all like, wow, bring it on. By the next morning, obviously at some stage we must have gone to sleep. Next morning I woke up, we've had nothing. And the lake's gone a little bit quiet. There hasn't been a lot of other bites about, which you expect. When you get the first day of a season, you know, when they've been, and we're going to get this year, when fish have been left alone for months throughout the spring, what tends to happen is they get very, very confident and very, very free and easy. You can hand feed them, as Chris Ball was doing up in the Church Bay. Yeah, they're almost like tame creatures, but it takes that long for them to wise up. As soon as those leads start going in, as soon as the first one's hooked, boom, the game changes totally. And what usually happens is they go to the furthest away spot, the middle, you know, as far from each bank as they can get. That's just their defence mechanism. Now the swim I was on, I'm looking straight down the lake, and I can see the lodge on the far end in front of me. I'm in the middle of the lake basically, and I'm looking straight down the centre line. And I'm sat there having a cup of tea, looking out, and then I see one come out, just head and shoulder, just in the middle, nice and quiet. That was a good fish, because you know that size of fish, when they come out, especially if you get them side on, they look proper impressive. I'm sat there looking, and I was just seeing another one. Same spot, right in the middle. Keith's just wandered around, see anything happening. I said, mate, they're down there. They're down there. Let's go and have a look. So we've taken a couple of bits with us, probably wound in the rods and taken them, something, just in case we can get near them. Anyway, we've gone round the Church Bay, down the left-hand bank, which is like the potato field bank. Got halfway down, we thought it must have been about here somewhere, and there's 2 swims. Nobody in them. Didn't look like they'd been fished for ages, to be honest. They had grass yay long in them. all sort of reeds grown over at the front. Lovely swims. It was a high bank where we were standing, and then you went down a little slope into the two swims, and each one had their own little slope. And then another one's come out and thought, so that's it, we've got it all triangulated now. I thought that's where they are, and they were in front of the right hand of the two swims. Maybe a little bit on the left hand side of it, but in front of the right hand swim, definitely. Of course, we both want the right hand swim, so we don't know more than we flicked a coin. You know, heads right, tails left, or whatever. Keith's got it. Like, oh. So he's gone in that. They're right next to each other. There's bushes in between, but they're probably only a couple of rod lengths apart. Anyway, he's gone into the right hand swim. I've gone into the left hand swim. Another one's come out, gone down, big old ripples spreading out, and you just heard simultaneous whoosh, me and him casting. Both rigs arced out, and they must have landed about yay far apart, one on each side of the riffles. It's like, whoa, whoa, sort of in the middle, and it janks. Yeah, whatever. So we got a second rod out each. And I remember at the time I was still sort of in pit 4 and hairfield mode. I liked to fish the tips up, you know, for the gravel bars and that. Horton didn't have any of that, but I remember we got the rods out, 2 rods each, and we put the low chairs on the high bank behind the two swims. It was actually sort of more, we could see my swim better than his. He's had a big overhanging sort of tree you had to go around. So we sat up the back there and we're watching these fish coming out, and I got my tips up over this sort of foliage at the front. And as we sat there watching, my right hand rod just nodded once like that, and then it's just pulled forward. And it was in those days, or at that time, I was fishing the lines in line clips on the rods, and then a bit of a drop on these great big heavy PTFE bobbins. So what had happened is the tip would pull down, you'd get a ping as it came out of the clip, and then the bobbin would just go crack into the rod, and then the spool would start spinning, which is exactly what happened. Over it went crack, and away it went, jumped down this, you know, there was a slope, which jumped straight over the side, grabbed the rod, started playing this fish. Keith got his camera, took a few photos. Took a photo of me actually, you know, bent into this carp, and then it started kiting. It fought like that, you know, it was a good fish. I could tell straight away I'd caught enough carp by now to know this was a proper good fish. Deep water, heavy fight, you know, that slow plodding that they do. Weren't taking a lot of line, but I weren't getting any line. And it's gone round, and it's kited, and it's kited, and it's kited. And eventually it's managed to, I've got some line back, but eventually it's kited right round into the bank. Keith's run along and done the old stone method where you chuck loads of stuff in where you think the fish is and spook it, and it worked. It spooked back out the bushes and come round in front of me, and I'm just thinking, my knees are shaking. I'm thinking, this is, you know, the lake's already done a 40 pounder and there's all these other 18 members. This is one of them. I know this is one of the 18. It was like nothing I'd ever hooked, and it's plodding about in this great big deep margin in front of me like that. It's come out in front, and I thought, oh, we're winning the battle now, and then it just went like that. The hook just came out. It didn't, it wasn't under pressure. It wasn't anything. It just wasn't on the end anymore. 1 minute, you know, I'm just like, what can this be? And next minute, nothing. It just wound in. Nothing wrong with the hook. Nothing wrong with the rig. Nothing. It just gone. I was destroyed. I was absolutely gutted. Couldn't believe it. Just, it's one of them, isn't it? You know, 1 minute you're up there, and the next minute, oh God. Anyway, rebaited the rod, got it back out there. I thought it was Keith that was going to be catching, because he was, you know, in the swim that they were in. I know I was sort of nearly in the swim as well, but he didn't have a bite. That's that first trip. I had 2 more bites from that swim. I think the first was an 18-pound common, and the second was a very strange grey, almost white-looking mirror of just over 20 pound. But I mean, even when I played both of those fish, I thought, this is nothing. You know, I've hooked them and just played them like normal carp and in the net, and that. And it just made me realise. Can you hear that through the microphone? That was my stomach. That's how hungry I am. Hoping that Irving Dawes is going to make another breakfast. Can't hear any clanging and banging though, so who knows. Yeah, but when I played these second and third fish, down there, I realised that, you know, that first one, it made it obvious that first one was a monster, an absolute lost monster. And that's how we ended that first trip, with 2 fish under my belt, probably about half a dozen new mates, and we just couldn't wait to get back. It was just, it was the place of dreams for us. Right, I'm back again. I just had to take a little break and go and eat something. The noise of my stomach was just too much to put up with. Made myself a cup of tea as well. It's boiling up here today. Anyway, where were we? Going home after the first session. New friends, 2 fish under my belt. I don't think I waited very long before I came back again. Like I said before, I was sort of an Artexer in those days, and very, very, very flexible working hours. So I think I worked the first couple of days of the week, and then loaded up and back down the lake. At this stage, the only downside that nearly put me off Horton totally was there was a no dogs rule. I was to flout that and change it over the coming weeks, but I think the first 2 weeks that I went there, I didn't have the dog. She was at home, which wasn't really the one, to be honest, and I'd started to make sort of inquiries, and I think the head bailiff back then had said, if you ever get stuck, no one to look, because I said, there's not often anyone to look after her, and I think he said, if you get stuck and she stays on a lead, we might consider it. So I'd already made my plans for the next week, but this was only the second week. I wanted to get my feet firmly under the table first before I started breaking the rules. So anyway, down there for this second session. Now, in my mind, I wanted to be on this, I think it was the north bank, the potato field bank, where I'd had these 2 fish. So I've got down there, I've gone for a trot round just with a bucket or a couple of rods or whatever. Got round to the north bank, and there's 3 swims there that fish out to the middle. All 3 were empty. I was like, I can't believe it, People knew I'd caught from there. There wasn't, that first year, I don't think, when I remember back, it wasn't that busy. I don't think the syndicate was maybe not even full, because you all seem to be able to move around and get where you wanted to go. It's not a big lake. Acreage, I don't know, I'm going to say 14. Don't know why, it just rings a bell. Might be totally wrong. Might have been 24. I don't know. But yeah, not a big lake, but there was plenty of room always. But anyway, these 3 swims was free. I thought I'm going straight in the middle one, the one that Keith was in the week before, because I thought, although I was the one that had the bites in what became the reed swim on the left, I knew I was casting into his swim, and I knew that's where the fish were. I was convinced I could get them out of here. Anyway, I got in there and I've set up, and it must have been a bit later in the week, so I think Keith was due down the next day, so maybe this was a Thursday. Obviously Keith's got his own car now, so he can come and go as he pleases. And I blanked, I didn't catch anything that night. And the next day Keith turned up and he's gone next door into the right hand swim, which became the ski slope, but this was way before we'd named them. He's gone in the right hand swim for whatever reason. Put your baits out there. We sat there having a chat and what have you, and he's had a take. And he's looked into this fish, his first Horton carp, and we're thinking, this is the land of the giants here. He's not going to, because obviously he was plagued by doubles over pit 4, 2-3 years or whatever, without catching a 20-pounder out of there. And he's playing this fish. He's putting up a fair sort of fight. It's not the monster like the one I lost, but he's still having a bit of a row. It's kind of come up, I've gone down to the front and netted it. As soon as I looked at the net, I started laughing. There's no way that's the 20-pounder. It was close. 19, I think it was. Maybe even 19 and a half, I might give him. But no, another double. I just don't know. At that stage, I don't know how he did it, to be honest. I'm sure he fished a lake, with all 40-pounders and one 17-pounder. He'd have called it a 17-pounder. But it did make me laugh, gave me something to take the piss out of anyway. So anyway, later on that afternoon, we sat having a beer and just chilling out behind the swims. And then Keith pipes up that not a million miles away, I was called Marine, I think it was, not really sure, in a couple of changing rooms, Watson and Eubank were warming up, ready for their very first encounter. Now, if you're a boxing fan, you'll remember that. It was a major event. And we had a choice. We could either sit there and listen to it on a little transistor radio thing we had. Well, right behind us was a potato field, and across the potato field, which hadn't yet grown very high, we could see a pub. I mean, it was like a gift from heaven. It was just there. It was called it's changed now, but I think it was the 5 Bells, 6 Bells, 5 Bells. Had bells in it anyway. Had beer in it, more to the point, and had a big widescreen TV in it. So our mind was made up, and later on we trotted across the field. It was literally, a few hundred yards, a little path around the side of the potato field. Came out, it emerged actually into the pub back garden. So we've gone in there, found a table somewhere near the TV, got a tray of beers, and got all settled in, ready to watch. We were thirsty. We had more than a few beers. I think that tray got refilled a few times before the fight came on. It was a victory to Eubank in the end. But coming back across that field, we must have looked like we'd been in the fight the way we were staggering, I would imagine. Got back in our swims, chucked the rods out, straight to bed. We were all over, all in, out for the count, quite literally. Next morning, very early, far too early for me with a hangover. I remember Keith appearing in my bivvy, shaking the bivvy. Laney, I got one. Something, just blurred words to that effect. I was just like, tea. He said, I got one. Tea. And he disappeared. Came back, bless him, about 5 minutes later with a cup of tea. I went, right, now, get up, I've got one. So there I am, got a cup of tea. My first question was, how big is it? Is it over £20? He went, oh yeah, it's definitely over £20. I think it's about mid-20. I was like, okay, yeah, brilliant, well done. Shook his hand and that, and we wandered round to his swim in the ski slope. Anyway, he's gone down, I've got everything ready, scales, camera and what have you. And he's hoiked the net out with this fish in, buffed it up, and I thought, ain't a bad fish actually, as it goes. Laid it on the mat, but we were both worse for wear. We really were both worse for wear. And I say this as an excuse, really, for what happened next. Got him up on the mat, utmost care was taken with the fish. It's not a disaster in that department at all. Wetted the sling, got him in there, put him up on the scales. Now, he'd already said to me, this fish is a mid-20. Now, back in the day, I used to have Avon scales, which I'd brought along from my swim. Keith had these Salter little black plastic things. They were rubbish. I mean, the sort of thing you'd weigh a perch on, not a big carp. So I'd brought my scales, which were Avon scales, which were the scale of choice for the carp angler back then in the day. Mine only went up, mine were old, and they only went up to £32, and then they did bring out one that went to £40. Excuse me. And what they had, I'll try and get a picture off I haven't got them anymore, but I'll try and get a picture off of the internet of a set of scales, and if I do, then you'll be looking at that now and you'll see coloured rings. Now, what used to happen is the needle used to go around £8 per complete revolution, and you would work out by the colour. So if it went around once, it was whatever the outside colour is. I haven't got the picture here, I can't see. Twice it would be the inner colour, and 3 times it worked like that. So you'd look at you'd watch the needle go round and then read the number off the colour on the 3rd revolution, 2nd revolution, whatever. But we didn't do that. He'd said it was a mid-20, but what was on the scales, he lifted it up. I looked as much as I could through eyes like pickled onions, stared at the scales and went for the nearest to mid-20s, which I believe was £25 10 ounces, which was great, major result. Anyway, taking the photos, I remembered something. I have had to read through the book over and over again because obviously I've got all these memories. They're not going to come out to you always in the right order, because I've got a lot of stuff going on up here. So I've been sort of reading up at night, ready for the next day's filming, and I do remember the weight, £25 10 ounces. We took the photos, and like I was just about to say, I remember through that I had something like 4 or 5 photos left on my film, because they were old-fashioned film cameras. So I clicked off what I had left, didn't go mad with the photos. We put the fish back, And it was all happy days, you know. I can't remember what happened throughout the rest of the day, but it was all good fun, I'm sure. Sure, we had a great big fry-up breakfast and what have you, you know, enjoyed ourselves. I didn't catch for that session at all. Anyway, we've gone home. I've gone straight to the boots or whatever, put the film in, got it developed and brought it up the next week for Keith. In fact, I think I drove around his house with the prints, because he only lived up the road from me, and gave him the prints of this fish. And the first thing, you know, fair enough, that he did say was, Christ, that looks massive. And I'm looking at it thinking, it does look massive, you know, like properly massive, like an awful lot bigger than 25 pound 10 ounces. We'd made a real schoolboy error, but we didn't know it at this stage. When Keith got up the lake, he actually pinned, they'd started to do a wall like this, but with all the captures in the lodge. We'd started to fit out the whole lodge. You know, people that had spare stuff, just old stuff, would bring it up. Somebody brought up a sofa, a couple of people brought up these big old armchair jobs, just old stuff. A table appeared. The kitchen started getting fitted out. You know, someone had, there was just water and a sink and bits, and someone bought, I don't know, an old cooker, and someone else bought a fridge, and then a freezer appeared, and somebody did the shower up, so that worked perfectly. We were making it like a little home thing going on there, but the wall started to be, you know, sort of the photo wall. Anyone that caught a fish, it went up there. If you knew its name, it was scribbled underneath it. We also had a corresponding logbook in there for all the captures, so everything that was caught. You had the dates, the fish, I think the swim, can't remember, and the weight, and a little comment at the end. So anyway, Keith's photo went up there. Everybody that went in that day, the first thing they said was, "Oh my God, what's that one? It's massive." And they go, "Find Keith. What's that fish?" You know, "That's at 25." They go, "Are you sure? Are you sure? It looks really big." And I was saying, "Yeah, I'm a good photographer. You know, I know the angle to get it at to make them look." It wasn't one of the, you know, we knew all the A-team and that, but the thing was, in Horton at the time, it hadn't only been stocked from the main known lake, Fox Pool, at Longfield. It was the other lake next door as well, the road lake, that had been drained of fish, and the fish from there had gone in. So there was, and a couple from another lake. So there were two main lakes worth of stock in there, and the odd extra, which would explain a lot of the mistake. It would be 18 months before we realised. 18 months later, I won't ruin the story, but I caught the same fish, and much bigger, massively bigger. And then we realised the mistake. What we'd done is we'd not counted the revolutions, and 25.5 pounds plus 8 pounds made it 33.5 pounds. Look at that for maths. So he'd actually caught a 33 pound 10 ounce fish, his biggest fish by a country mile, bigger than my biggest fish, and I'd always had a bigger PB than Keith and made a point of it. So he'd actually, you know, completely blown it all away, and we never knew. And we didn't know for another 18 months that we completely cocked up the weighing of it by 8 pounds. I mean, that's a big error, isn't it? There's a big difference between, you know, a mid-20 and a mid-30. Huge difference in looks. But somehow we'd done it, and that was Keith's sort of first 30 pounder at 25 pounds 10 ounces, bless him. A word about bait at this stage of the operation. We were still making our own bait. I banned Keith from the rituals, weren't allowed. So we were still making our own bait. And what we had, like I said before, when we was, you know, on Pit 4 and Harefield and that, we had a fish meal bait that we used to make. But what we actually had, we'd put together through the 1 or 2 books that were around at the time, Carp Fever, Maddox's, and there wasn't much in the way of, too much in the way of bait ingredients, like a lot less companies. Back when Harefield sort of time, we'd made what we called the carrier. So that was, it was quite expensive, and that was milk proteins like calcium caseinate. I can't even remember names of half of them now, sodium caseinate, a binder of something. There was 30 mesh casein, which made them hard. There was something we used to put in to bind them up, which was another milk protein. Like I say, this is all going way back in my memory. And that was always 50% of our mix, and then we'd add 50% of fish meals, or 50% whatever we wanted the bait to. Excuse me, tea's repeating on me. I'm a little bit of breakfast. Yeah, we'd add 50% of whatever we wanted it to become. And on Horton, we'd found a new, out where we lived, near where we lived, sort of in the country beyond Crawley, countryside beyond Crawley. We had found a bird food supplier, and we'd found this thing called gold pate, and it was a yellow sort of bird food, and it had some sort of honey on it. It used to be really sticky. You could squeeze it in a big ball. They had, in this place, it was like a big warehouse, and they just had open sacks of stuff, and you could go along and just pick and mix what you liked. And we'd found this Insecta Pro or something like that, and it was dried, crushed insects, and that's what we'd put. So we've got this bird food bait this year with these little insecty stuff in there. And also I'd got back into my particles. I used to love particles way back on like the little Sussex ponds and that. We used to fish like chickpeas and stuff like that. But and obviously on Pit 4 we'd done the nuts. But this, I decided I was going to get back into like particles, not nut fishing, but particle fishing. And to that end, I'd bought myself a Burco boiler, one of these water boilers. It was quite a big one. It's not one of these little turret ones, but a great big, huge thing. And I'd bought a sack of maple peas. It'd always been a bit of a favourite of mine and Keith. We used to get these, they call them mini maples, they're like half-size maples. And we used to soak them for a long time, 24 to 48 hours, to get them really sodden. Then we used to boil the grandmother out of them, and then leave them in a bucket with the lid on. And what used to happen, they'd start off light brown, but they'd go almost purple, and they'd start to ferment in the bucket. So when you pulled the lid off, it would be bubbling. It's really sort of acidic, it'd come out, take the top of your head off. And they gave off this real thick, milky juice. They were fantastic bait. They were. So anyway, I think it was the next trip I've turned up at Horton, and I'd cooked. I used to make my own beer as well at that stage, and I bought one of these brewer's buckets. So it's not like a normal carp fishing bucket, which is 5 litres or whatever. They were a lot bigger, big white bucket, huge, great thing. Could hardly lift it when it was full of maples. And I brought one of these. I probably had about 20 key in it. So I brought this bucket down, and I'm determined this is what I'm going to do. It's getting really warm now of the year. So I wanted to get somewhere shallow. I think this plateau swim had done a couple of fish by now, and there was one opposite called the spindly tree, and that fish, like, if you imagine the plateau is like a tadpole. Yeah. So on one side you've got, from this side, from the plateau swim, you're fishing at a plateau, and from the other side you're fishing the tail of it that came off, just a little bar. So it's like sort of tadpole shaped. Now the plateau was taken. That was my choice one, but there was no one in the spindly tree. So I've gone round there, mate. You should have seen it. There was carp everywhere, all on the surface, and you could see the shape of the plateau by their route. Obviously they wanted to be on that shallower water, and every time they veered off the side of the bar, they'd go back onto the shallower, just going round in this tadpole shape, round and round and round and round. Not, you weren't going to get a bite just by chucking it out on top of them. I did consider floaters, but I thought, no, I've got a plan. I'm going to stick to this plan. I'm going to go through with it. So I've ripped the top off this bucket, and it was a hot day. I'd been in the back of the van. It was heaving. It was like it was boiling with all the gases and blub, blub, blub coming out of it. It was like a witch's cauldron full of something disgusting. And I'd got a very early version of a spod that I'd made myself. Back in the day, we used to make them out of washing up bottles, the squeegee bottles, and you just basically cut the tapered bit off the top. I rammed a piece of foam or a piece of cork, big disc of it, in the end of it to give it that bit of buoyancy. Didn't have fins or anything like that. Drilled 3 holes in it, tied a bit of line to it. Used to cast like a bag of spanners, and didn't empty out most of the time. When it did, most of it ended up on your head, but it sort of worked. So I decided I'm just going to put this bucket out there. So I started bosh, putting out. The carp just went woof all over the place. But I thought, that don't matter. They will be back. You know, it'll be the same tomorrow. It was another hot day forecast for the day after. And I've started smashing it out there. You know, it takes, with a decent delivery system, like the sort of things we've got on the go now, to do a big bucket of bait, it's going to take you some hours. But when you've got this stupid little squeegee bottle, that, you know, it's hard to load, it's hard to cast. It took all day, I reckon. And I had, imagine you've been out on a push bike with no back mud guard, yeah, through a muddy field, and you get that spray all up your back. Well, I had that stinking maple juice all over my head, it was all over my brolly, it was all over my tackle, it was all over the swim. I just kept dipping and casting, dipping and casting, going bosh in the water, making a hell of a row. But the more I did, the more this slick was appearing, you know, and there was all, because I'd stewed the granny out of these maples, there was bits, it wasn't just round maple peas, there was just sludge as well. So, you know, I could imagine the water column out there over this shallow water full of all this, like, porridge, if you like, you know, little bits going up and down and all over the place. I finished the do, put my rods out. I was using a hideous rig that I'd invented at the time. It basically, instead of a hair, it had this long, semi-stiff pin, and you'd slide the maples down it, a piece of cork on the top, and then it clipped into a bit of silicone, so you had this bizarre sort of stack of maples. Anyway, I put them out there, and thought nothing else of it. Thought, well, that's, the swim's destroyed. I'll settle in and wait events. So a little bit later that evening, I was sitting there sort of praying that the fish had come back. I had actually seen a little bit of activity, so I was feeling fairly confident. I looked down and there was a guy walking along the bottom bank from where I was fishing, the Spindly Tree. There was probably one little swim further on than me, and then there was the bottom bank which didn't really have swims as such. It was just like a little grassy bank. And I looked along and there was this little bald fella coming along with not very much tackle at all. He had a little tiny triangular rucksack and a little tiny bed chair, a couple of rods and what have you. And he's come down there and he's sort of got himself set up. And I've left him to it, let him get on with it. And I've seen clip, blip. He's just sort of underarmed a couple of baits, put a couple around it, got himself settled in. Anyway, later that evening, I thought, I'm a bit bored, I'll wander up and, you know, be a bit sociable, have a chat with a fella. So I walked round into his swim. First thing I noticed straight away, I thought, my God, somebody's got gear worse than mine, or older than mine. You know, I'm still using the Cardinal 55s and my Sport X rods or whatever I was on by then. You know, moved from the Tricast onto the L Sport X, but still quite old gear. Everything was bent and out of place. But, you know, his was on a different level. His was 10, 20 years before mine even. He had the old, most people probably won't even remember him, but the old Mitchells used to do a 300, which I used to use back in the day, and a 410, which was the blue version. And he had these pair of these Mitchell 410 blue reels, ancient old rods. Everything about his setup was just, it was cool. I loved it. He used to use, like we did back in the 70s, bottle tops off the wine bottles, when you used to pull that plastic cap off and then you'd slit the flat bit off and put a slot all the way around at an angle so you could hang it on your line like a plastic tube, and when you were playing a fish it would spin round and fall off. So he's got these bottle tops things, wine bottle things hanging down, and I thought, I like you, you're alright. He sat there on this little, it wasn't even a fishing low chair, little camp low chair thing. And it turned out it's Phil Thompson, the first time I met him. And I sat and had a drink and smoke with him and a bit of a chat and that. And I thought, yeah, he was very, a little bit eccentric, Phil. Obviously, he became a very good mate for years afterwards. But even first impressions, you think a little bit eccentric, a bit dry humour, but nice guy. Anyway, I had a chat and that with him for a little while. Then wandered back, went to bed. Next morning, woke up, got my low chair out, got down by the rods. I'm waiting for something to occur, waiting to see signs of fish coming in. So I'm sort of scouring the area, and I looked round and I said, Phil had said he was only there for the night. They had to go work in the morning. I see he'd folded everything away and he was just winding in his first rod, I think, or he was doing, you know, busying himself, tidying up, ready to go. I sort of looked round, trying to wave goodbye, be busy. Anyway, when I next look round, I can see him rod's bent right over it, tugging and that, and I thought, it's very weedy by now, Horton was. And I thought he's obviously just got stuck in the weeds, you know, with his little rods and his little reels and can't get it out. And yeah, thought no more of it, and I looked around a couple of minutes later and he's still tugging and pulling, and then he's got the net out and he's like, you know, a big ball of weed and a few swirls and stuff going on. Bloody hell, he's got one. Didn't hear an alarm or anything, and he was literally packing up a few minutes previous. So he got it in the net, I can see that he's landed. I shouted over, I said, how big, mate? He said, 40 pound. I was like, what? I thought, he's on the wind up, something's going on here. So I've wandered around to him. Sure enough, he's got the big one. He's got Jack on the bank on this little unhooking mat thing he had in his little net, had a solid, well not solid, but had a 6 foot aluminium handle, weighed a ton. I said, I didn't even nearly get a bite. He said, well, that's the thing. He said, I didn't. He said, I did have a couple of bleeps in the night. He said, and when I went to wind in to go to work this morning, one of them was solid, and when I pulled really hard, it pulled back. Fish had hooked itself, gone into the weed, and just sat there all night. And like I say, as he's got the wind in, it's pulled back, and he's played in, and he's got Jack the net ripper, biggest fish in the lake, full, I can't remember what he weighed, 42 pounds, I think, off the top of my head, but I may be wrong, but it's immaterial. How bizarre. I mean, just proper bizarre. And Phil was one of the guys that had, one of the two that had camcorders. Like I say, the only two on the lake that probably had tuppence lately to scratch their arse with, to be honest, but he had this camcorder, so I think I don't know, somebody else turned up, a couple of people turned up, and one of us has done the camcorder, and I think I've done photos, I can't remember. But yeah, so we've sort of recorded the event for today really, because I've still got that footage from that morning of Phil juggling Jack on the bank down in that little corner, so I'm going to show you that right now. Not small, is he?
What was it, 42 or 42 and a half, I believe, wasn't it? Yeah, 42 and a half. Never felt anything so big as the entrance into the Bishop.
There's a fair lamp.
How about that for a bit of ancient footage then? Like I say, I have got quite a lot of footage to come over the next few episodes. The first year we didn't have an awful lot. It was only if it was Phil or Sticky were around. But year 2 and 3 we've got quite a lot. Like I said, hideous clothing and strange hats and what have you, but there you go. So anyway, Phil had his 40 pounder, little present hanging on the end, and he toddled off to work or wherever he was going. I went back to my swim, as I just round the corner, sat there waiting events, and it was building, you know. I could see proper swirls and then the odd bit of dorsal just flicking up as they came up the side of the bar, round the plateau, and then they'd come back to my side, and then they'd go round the other side. Matey on the other side, on the plateau, hadn't had anything either. But I knew that I'd got this absolute mountain of maples out there. And at some stage they were going to go down on it. And it didn't take long, to be honest. As soon as a few fish built up over my side, sat there, and suddenly, boom, away it's gone. It's just ripped off, gone down there, hooked into it. And it's up on the sort of shallow slope on the side. And I looked onto it, it's chugged about. There was like a big band of weed down the side, must have been growing out the sort of base of the bar. It's chugged about trying to get his head in this weed for a bit, and then it's come off, like, over it into the deeper water, and then it's away, charging about. Fought really well. Again, you know, you can just sort of tell when you've got that weight behind him that it's going to be a good fish. So I'm playing this fish on my stupid maple rig. You know, success. I put all this effort into getting the bait out there, and I'd had a bite, everything. I'd waited and waited and waited. The plan had worked, and I played this fish. I was going really careful with it, you know, thinking back to the last time I looked at a monster, it just come off. But it weren't the case with this one. Everything went sort of according to plan. There's some of the normal disasters, you know, net getting caught in the brambles as you're trying to get it in, falling in at the last minute. But that's just standard stuff for me, really. Yeah, got him up. big old flank, like big old mirror with sort of almost linear type scales. Come over on its side. I thought, Christ, that's a big one. So he's up on the back of his head. Slid it in the net, had a look, and I knew what fish it was straight away. You know, it's one of the ones we'd looked at through the pictures of the A-team. It was a proper A-team member. In fact, it's probably the most genuine A-team member of them all. Not the biggest, but the most genuine, because it was the lady. Now, for those of you that don't know, the lady was the original in Longfield. So all of these fish that came over the A-team were the originals, but way back when, like in the mist of time, the lady was the original in Longfield before the other fish went and joined her. So this fish was ancient, absolutely ancient. And there it is, laying in the bottom of my net. It's just, what a feeling, you know. So it's just pure, a net full of history, pure history, laying there in your landing net. And I'm just over the moon with it. I mean, I can't remember even who came and took the photos for me, whether I was doing self-takes at that time, I can't remember. But I do remember taking it up into the potato field behind and angling. There's a thing at Horton. You've got Horton Church, you've got the pub and the church. So basically 2 churches right next to each other. My church and the other people's church. But the other people's church is always in the background, if possible, on a Horton catch pick. It's just iconic, it's part of it. So I've angled everything. It's scorching hot right now, absolutely meltingly hot by the time we took the photos. So I've got everything all set up, got the carp up there. I don't think I had a shirt on. It was like, in fact I didn't, because I can visualise the picture. Obviously that will be coming up here. Had my stupid hat on, and I've got this slice of history, you know, and just lifted it up in the sun, and it's just, what a moment, you know, for me. Just sort of blows you away sometimes. It's mad. I love carp fishing. I could talk about it all day. I absolutely love carp fishing, but it's moments like that, you know, just those little moments that just make you think, what are the dogs going on about? See, they love it so much, even they've got to join in. Someone's just come in the gate. Yeah, those little moments, those magical moments when something super, super special goes in your net, and that was about as special as you can get. So when I do these, edit these, whatever you want to call them, podcasts, video, blogs, vlogs, whatever, you may have noticed that generally almost exactly, they're an hour long. I was telling the missus about this last night. That is fluke, absolute fluke. I haven't got the time up here. I have no idea how long I chat for. When I edit it and add the other bits, I don't know how long it's going to end up. But they've been almost exactly an hour with them, and I have no idea how long I've been up here this morning. I know it is scorching hot up here, and I can't take an awful lot more of it. It's a really hot day. The sun's blasting in through there, and I'm in an attic. So obviously heat rises, it is getting a bit uncomfortable. But before I go for the day, I'm just going to finish off that first little saga. After I'd caught the lady, 34 pounds, obviously, got home, told Keith all about it. He was gagging to get back up the lake. I said, weekend angler. That following weekend, I believe it was, I'd got a party. Now, my parties back in the day, they were parties. If they were at my house, they were proper parties. I used to just invite everybody wholesale from the pub. Anybody and everybody in the pub. We had shared houses, so, you know, God, I'd have hated to live next door to me at that period of my life. It must have been hell to be my neighbour, or anywhere in my street. But I think there was a few of us sharing a house at this time. Whatever the situation was, I remember we had a party, and there was a lot of people there. Keith was obviously invited, but Keith wanted to go fishing, so Keith's gone up to Horton. I've done the do. Everyone's come round. We've had a proper wild time. While we were in the throes of this, like afternoon, getting in the garden, having a drink, building up to the main event in the evening, Keith was down at Horton, walking the banks, and he'd gone right up into the mouth of the Dog Bay, backing onto Kingsmead. And he'd gone up there, maybe found a little swim. It was a tiny little swim, just a little pallet at the front. And it was just a grass bank, but it was very slopey forwards. You had to set sort of quite a way back from the water's edge, and this gentle slope of grass down, and then this little tiny wooden pallet, only a dear little thing. Housed your rods. Obviously, he's now armed with a bucket of maples after my success with a lady. But for some reason, I think he said to me he'd bumped into somebody, CP I think, who said he'd been baiting that area with tigers. So Keith got in there and put his maple rod out, a load of maples, and with the other rod he sort of got it going on in here. He thought, oh, there's tigers been going in, you know. And he rummaged around in his rucksack and he found 2 dehydrated, knackered old tigers from something donkeys ago, like a trip in the close season. He used to go down to, that's it, Zig Gregorek's place down in Devon, which didn't have a close season, and he'd used tigers there, and he found these 2 dehydrated old tigers and threaded them onto a hair with a bit of cork and soaked them up a little bit, chucked them out on the other rod. Back in Crawley, party's in full swing. I think I got to bed at, I think it was about 3:30 in the morning. I eventually, the people drifted away and I crawled into bed. At 5 o'clock in the morning, my house phone's ringing. Pre-mobile still, yeah, obviously. My house phone's ringing, and I'm thinking, that can only mean one thing, you know. Nobody's phoning me at 5 o'clock in the morning unless they're a fisherman. Nobody's really phoning me properly unless it's Keith, because I don't think anyone else had my home phone number. So I sort of dragged myself out of bed to wherever the phone was and picked up the phone, and it just erupted in my head. There was screaming and yelling and hollering. What the people outside the phone box in Horton must have thought, I don't know, because he'd obviously had to walk up to the local shops or near his phone box. 5 o'clock in the morning, he's going absolutely mental. And, it's massive, I've got this fish, it's huge, it's enormous, it's this, that. They say, you've got to come and take the photos, you've got to come and take the photos. I'm thinking, I've only just gone to bed. But I said, yeah, all right. I think it was about a 45-minute journey from my house up there. I said, I'll see you in 45 minutes. So I've gone down, jumped in the car, and I've left. Got up there, and he's told me the story. What's transpired is the tiger nut rod, at first, well, not even, maybe just first light, that's trundled off with these knackered old prune-like tiger nuts. And he's hooked into a fish, and he's had a proper battle with it. You know, it's gone in this bit, it was a big band of weed you had to fish over to a clear strip behind, and it's gone in this big band of weed, and he can't get it out, and then he can get it out, and then it's on his side cutting. You know, he's had the absolute full drama with this, but he's managed to win, to get this fish in. You know, he might have netted the whole wee bed, I can't remember the entire story, but on parting it and on looking in, it's the one. It's the one I want, you know, it's the one he wants, it's the one that most people on the lake want. It's not the biggest one. You'd think Jack the Net Ripper would be everybody's target, but it wasn't the case. Shoulders, that was the target fish. That was the fish, just because it was such an odd looking fish. It's got this massive set of shoulders. Its head looked too small for its body. It was proper block shaped, and it was, you know, Schwarzenegger carp. It's an amazing, absolutely amazing fish, and he's got it, you know, he's got shoulders. He was so chuffed. I mean, over the moon, running around like this chicken with this, and all his colours going on, and his yellow shorts and his pink top and what have you. Yeah, that was one hell of a morning. It really was. I wasn't feeling too handy, I must tell you, but he was buzzing for it, and you can't really blame him, can you? It's just, I don't know, I'm going to have a look in a minute. I don't know whether we've got that on video or not. If we have, obviously, I'll show it to you. But before I go, I know I am going to go now, because I'm sure I'm up to my hour, and I'm starting to sweat up here. But just one other little word about Keith. This was obviously, I must point out, he'd now caught the biggest fish out of both of us. He'd already caught the biggest fish out of both of us, but we were only giving it 25 pound 10 ounces. But he, you know, so he had now had bragging rights. Keith has got a way of playing fish. Now we used to call it the come out of the sea method, because he is literally, he'd wind down and it was like, come out of the sea, you know, like he was on a boat fishing for shark. He is savage the way he plays fish. So landing shoulders for all that weed, I wouldn't have been like to have been there to see it. Just scary times. Every time he hooked a fish, everyone would go, oh no, because also if he'd get a bite, he used to have this thing, hopefully he doesn't do it anymore, where he'd pick up the rod, shut the clutch, and then wind right down, and then wind down some more, lean forward, and then just give it a heave over his shoulder, and it's like, oh my God. And once he got them on the end, he didn't give them line or anything, absolutely murdered them. And I've got a bit of video footage, which I'm going to end this with, and it's of Keith losing a fish from the ski slope swim. Turn your phone up a little bit. I won't talk over it, I'll just leave it. Turn your phone up a little bit, and you can hear in that last second when the fish goes, you can see it. You can see exactly what's going to happen. It rolls on the surface, and you can see what's going to happen. Turn your phone up, your computer or whatever, and just listen to that last sickening little crack. It's just, oh, even watching it now, it just makes me blood run cold. But there you go. So anyway, like I say, we're going to finish for today. I'm going to get out of this absolute sauna up here. I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to try my hardest to edit some old video footage, splice it all in, overlay a load of photos and produce something for you to watch. If you have enjoyed it, do me a favour when you finish, can you click subscribe, maybe even share, just get it out there a little bit. Subscribe's free. And if you do click subscribe, you get a notifications tab. So when the next one comes up, you get a little ping, you get a little message saying Laney's uploaded a new blah blah. If you're interested in books, still, again, I know every week I say the same, or every time I say the same, 15 quid, 25 quid for as long as the lockdown lasts on www.davelane.co.uk. So they're both on special discount COVID lockdown offer, whatever you want to call it. I never know what's PC and what's not, but you know, we're all banged up, aren't we? We're all in prison. Something to read. Anyway, until such times, ta-da.